My mother, Eleanor, had always been sharp. Too sharp. She remembered birthdays from 30 years ago, corrected people's grammar mid-sentence, and could tell you exactly where she was when any major event in history happened. She was the woman who never forgot. Until she forgot me. The first time it happened, we were sitting in the small cafeteria of the assisted living facility. Pale yellow walls. The smell of disinfectant and overcooked vegetables. I was holding a paper cup of coffee I hadn't touched. She stared at me politely and said, "Are you visiting someone, dear?" Dear. I laughed, because that's what people do when reality hits too hard. "Mom," I said gently, "it's me. Daniel. Your son." She tilted her head, studying my face like it was a painting she didn't recognize. "I don't have a son," she said calmly. "I had one. He passed." Something cracked inside my chest that day and never fully healed. The doctors called it early onset dementia. They said it progressed differently for everyone. Some days were clear, some were fog. Names went first, then relationships, then entire memories unraveled like loose thread. "She's not suffering," the neurologist told me. "She's peaceful." Peaceful. That word followed me home every night like an insult. Because I wasn't peaceful. I was grieving someone who was still breathing. My visits became routine. Same chair, same time, same disappointment. Some days she remembered I was familiar. Other days, I was just that nice man who brings apples. I learned to smile through it. Learned not to correct her too much. Learned to swallow my pain quietly because everyone told me the same thing. At least she doesn't know she's forgetting. But I knew. And then there was my Uncle Robert. He was my mother's younger brother, charming in a way that felt rehearsed. Always well dressed. Always smiling too much. He took over her finances to help. Moved her into the facility. Signed papers I hadn't even known existed. "You're too emotional," he told me once. "This requires a clear head." I believed him. Because I wanted to believe someone was in control. Weeks passed. Then months. My mother faded. She stopped asking questions. Stopped arguing. Stopped correcting anyone. That scared me more than the memory loss. She became compliant. One afternoon, I arrived early. The nurses didn't expect me. I walked quietly down the hallway toward her room. That's when I heard voices. Two people stood just outside her door. One was Uncle Robert. The other was a woman in a blazer, clipboard tucked against her chest. "She's deteriorating faster than expected," the woman said. Robert sighed. "Good." The doctor said the medication would accelerate confusion. Medication. I froze. Is the dosage still the same? The woman asked. "For now," Robert replied. "As long as she remains cooperative." My heart slammed against my ribs. I leaned closer, my breath shallow. "She signed the updated documents yesterday," Robert continued. "Didn't even question it. Didn't know what she was signing." The woman chuckled softly. "That's the advantage of patients like her. No resistance. Patients like her." I felt sick. My hand trembled as I pushed the door open. They both jumped. "Oh, Daniel," Robert said smoothly. "Didn't hear you there." I couldn't speak. My throat had closed. The woman glanced at her clipboard. "I'll check on another patient," she muttered and walked away. Robert smiled at me like nothing had happened. "Your mother's resting." I walked past him without a word and entered the room. My mother sat in her chair by the window. Thin, small, fragile in a way she had never been before. Her eyes were unfocused. "Hi," I whispered. "It's me." She didn't respond. I turned back to Robert. "What medication?" I asked. He waved dismissively. "Standard treatment. Doctor's orders. For dementia." I pressed. "Yes." Something in his tone was wrong. Too quick. Too final. I sat beside my mother and took her hand. It was cold. "I'm here, Mom," I said softly. "You're safe." She blinked slowly. Then Robert spoke again, casually, like he was discussing the weather. "She won't remember this anyway." That sentence did it. My mother's fingers tightened around mine. Her eyes snapped into focus. Slowly, she turned her head toward him. And for the first time in months, her voice was clear. "She remembers," my mother said. The room went dead silent. Robert laughed nervously. "Eleanor, you're confused." She ignored him and looked straight at me. "Daniel," she said. My name. Perfectly. My breath caught in my throat. She squeezed my hand harder and whispered, barely loud enough to hear. He thinks I don't understand. I stared at her, heart pounding. What do you understand, Mom? I asked. Her eyes flicked toward the door. Everything, she said. And in that moment, I knew two things. My mother was not gone. And someone had worked very hard to make us believe she was. I didn't let go of her hand. I was afraid if I did, she would disappear again, fade back into the fog everyone insisted she lived in. Say it again, I whispered. My name. She looked at me, really looked at me, the way only a mother can. The way that sees past age, past exhaustion, past fear. Daniel, she said softly. My stubborn boy. Tears burned my eyes. Uncle Robert cleared his throat behind us. This is a moment of clarity, he said quickly. It happens. Don't read too much into it. My mother's grip tightened. He's lying, she said. The room felt suddenly too small. Robert laughed, but it sounded thin. Eleanor, you're confused. You've been confused for months. She turned to him slowly, deliberately. I forget things, she said. I am not confused. I felt my heart pounding in my ears. What do you mean? I asked her. Mom, how long have you known? She hesitated, then spoke quietly, as if every word cost her strength. Since the pills changed. Robert's smile vanished. They told me they were to help me sleep, she continued. Then I couldn't think straight. My head felt heavy, slower, and when I stopped asking questions, she swallowed. Everyone seemed relieved. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. What pills? I demanded, turning to Robert. He raised his hands. Calm down. You're upsetting her. No, my mother said sharply. He's upsetting because he's listening. Silence stretched between us. Robert's eyes flicked toward the door. Then back to me. You don't understand how expensive care is, he said. I was protecting her. By drugging her. I snapped. By simplifying things, he replied coldly. You live your life. I handle the rest. My mother laughed, a short, bitter sound. He thinks I don't notice, she said. But I do. When I pretend to forget, people tell the truth around me. My stomach dropped. What truth? I asked. She looked at me, pain flickering across her face. He sold the house, she said. My house. The one your father built. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. That's impossible, I said. He can't. He can, Robert interrupted. Power of attorney. Signed and legal. My mother shook her head slowly. I never agreed, she said. I was medicated, and I knew if I protested, they'd say it was the disease. My hands were shaking now. How long have you been pretending? I asked her. She closed her eyes. Long enough to survive, she whispered. Robert stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. You should stop talking. She opened her eyes and met his stare. Or what? She asked. You'll tell them I forgot again. I stepped between them. You're done, I said. I'm reporting this. He scoffed. To who? Doctors who already believe she's gone. A system that trusts paperwork more than people. I didn't answer. Because I was starting to understand something terrifying. He was right. That night, I didn't leave. I stayed in her room, sitting beside her bed while machines hummed quietly. When the nurse came with evening medication, I stood up. What is that? I asked. She hesitated. It's prescribed. By whom? I pressed. She checked the chart. Dr. Keller. I want a second opinion, I said. Tomorrow. The nurse looked uncertain. Then she looked at my mother. My mother met her gaze and said clearly, I do not consent to this medication. The nurse froze. For the first time, someone looked at my mother not as a patient, but as a person. I'll note that, the nurse said quietly and left. My mother exhaled, exhausted. They'll try again, she murmured. I won't let them, I said. She reached for my hand. Daniel, if something happens to me. Nothing's going to happen, I interrupted. She smiled sadly. You've always said that. She leaned closer and whispered something that sent a chill through my spine. He's not just after my money. I frowned. What else is there? She looked toward the dark window. Proof, she said. And if he finds it before you do, I won't just forget again. I swallowed hard. What proof? Her eyes met mine, sharp and urgent. Why your father really died. I couldn't sleep that night. My mother's words kept echoing in my head, why your father really died. For months, I had thought my father's death was a tragic accident. Heart attack, nothing more. But now, doubt had crept in like a shadow. Morning light barely broke through the curtains when I made my first move. I rummaged through old photo albums, stacks of paperwork, and the hidden drawer in her desk, something my mother had hinted at years ago. My fingers trembled as I unearthed an envelope, yellowed and brittle, with my father's handwriting on it. It was labeled, "If anything happens to me, read this carefully." I tore it open and read aloud. "Daniel, if you're reading this, it means I can no longer protect your mother. Keep your eyes open. Robert is not what he seems. He wanted control of everything, even if it meant hurting us. Never trust him blindly. Look for the ledger. It's hidden in the basement, under the loose floorboard near the furnace. Everything is there, proof." I froze. The basement. The furnace. I knew exactly where she meant. I glanced at my mother. She was awake, her eyes sharper than I'd seen in months. "You found it," she said, almost smiling. I nodded. "But, I can't go down there while he's around." Her expression hardened. "Then we'll wait for him to leave. But Daniel, once we start this, there's no turning back." I understood. This wasn't just about money. This was about uncovering the lies that had been buried for years. By mid-morning, Robert had gone out, probably to the bank, probably to check his investments. That was my window. I grabbed a flashlight and crept to the basement. My heart pounded in my chest. The air was thick with dust, the smell of damp wood making me cough. I knelt by the furnace, just where the envelope had instructed. My hands shook as I lifted the loose floorboard. Beneath it, a small metal box glinted in the dim light. I pried it open. Inside were files, receipts, and photographs, proof of manipulation, embezzlement, and something worse, documents that suggested Robert had been involved in shady dealings around my father's death. I stared at one file, my hands trembling. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture was darker than I could have imagined. Suddenly, a sound echoed from the stairs. My pulse doubled. "Daniel." My mother's voice, calm but firm, called from above. I froze. Robert's car hadn't returned yet, but could he have come back early? "Take it slow," my mother whispered from the shadows at the top of the stairs. "We need to do this carefully. One wrong move and it all ends." I nodded silently, hiding the files in my jacket. This was bigger than I had expected. When I returned upstairs, she was sitting on the couch, waiting, as if she had been expecting me all along. "Did you find it?" she asked, voice steady. "Yes," I said. My hands still shaking, I laid the files in front of her. She studied them carefully, her eyes scanning, analyzing every detail. After a long moment, she looked up. "They'll come after us," she said softly. "I don't care," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm not letting him get away with this." Her hand found mine, gripping it tightly. "Good," she said, "because knowing the truth isn't enough. We have to prove it." And in that moment, I realized, our fight had just begun. The first thing I learned about truth is this. The moment you uncover it, someone else knows you have. Robert came back earlier than expected. I was in my mother's room, carefully restacking the files back into my jacket, when I heard his voice in the hallway, too calm, too controlled. "Daniel," he said, smiling as he stepped inside. "You're still here." My mother didn't flinch. "Yes," she said evenly. "He's my son." Robert's eyes flicked to her, just for a second. Not anger. Calculation. "I thought you might be tired," he replied. "These visits can be confusing." "For you," she said. "Not for me." Silence. Robert set his keys down slowly. I noticed his knuckles were white. "I spoke with the facility administrator," he said. "They're concerned about your behavior, Daniel." I felt my stomach tighten. My behavior. Questioning medical decisions. Interfering with treatment. "It's not healthy for your mother." My mother laughed softly. "You mean it's inconvenient?" Robert ignored her and turned to me. "You've always been emotional," he said. "Just like your father. And look where that got him." The words landed like a slap. "What do you mean by that?" I asked. He smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing," he said. "Just history." That's when I knew. He knew about the basement. He knew about the files. Because people who are innocent don't speak in half-sentences and threats disguised as concern. That night, the atmosphere in the facility changed. Nurses who had smiled before now avoided eye contact. A doctor I'd never seen came in to evaluate my mother. He didn't ask her questions, he talked about her, like she wasn't in the room. She's exhibiting false clarity, he said. A known symptom. My mother sat quietly, hands folded. I interrupted. Test her, I said. Right now. The doctor frowned. This isn't necessary. Ask her my name. The room went still. The doctor sighed and turned to her. Mrs. Eleanor, do you know who this man is? She looked at me. My son, she said clearly. Daniel. The doctor hesitated. And today's date, she answered. Where are we? She answered. I could see the shift, the moment the narrative started to crack. Robert stepped forward. She has good days, he said quickly. Then it fades. My mother looked up at him. Not when you stop poisoning me, she said. The doctor stiffened. Poisoning. Robert's face hardened. That's enough, he snapped. You're upsetting her again. No, my mother said. You're afraid. I reached into my jacket. I didn't pull out the files. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and pressed play. The recording was short, just 30 seconds. But it was enough. The doctor said the medication would accelerate confusion. As long as she remains cooperative. Robert's voice filled the room. The doctor went pale. Where did you get that? Robert demanded. I met his stare. You made the mistake of thinking no one was listening. Security was called. Administration followed. Questions were asked. Real ones. Robert tried to regain control, but control slips fast when the truth gets air. As they escorted him out, temporarily, he leaned close to me and whispered. You think this ends me? I whispered back. No, this ends your lies. Later that night, my mother lay in bed, exhausted but alert. You played it right, she said softly. It's not over, I replied. She nodded. He won't stop. She reached under her pillow and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. A small flash drive. He never found this, she said. I kept it where he wouldn't look. My pulse quickened. What's on it? She met my eyes. Everything he's done, she said. And everything he did to your father. My hands closed around it. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. And I knew. The storm was finally here. I didn't sleep. The flash drive sat on the table between my mother and me, like a loaded weapon. Small, silent, dangerous. Once this leaves the room, I said, there's no going back. My mother nodded. He took everything else from me, she replied. He doesn't get this. By morning, the facility felt different. Lighter. As if the walls themselves had been holding their breath. The doctor who had examined her the night before returned, with another doctor this time. Independent, careful, respectful. They reviewed the medication history, the dosage, the timing, the signatures. No one spoke for a long time. This treatment is not appropriate, the second doctor finally said. In fact, it explains the accelerated symptoms. My mother closed her eyes, not in relief, but in exhaustion. It wasn't dementia, I whispered. It was real, the doctor said carefully. But it was made worse. Intentionally or not, that will be investigated. That was enough. I took the flash drive and left. I went somewhere Robert never expected me to go, because he thought I was weak. I went to the truth. The files were meticulous. My mother had always been like that. Dates, audio recordings, bank transfers, emails, signed documents, patterns that told a story no one could explain away as confusion. There was even a recording of my father's voice. If you're hearing this, it means Robert crossed the line. My hands shook as I listened. My father had known. He had confronted Robert, threatened to expose him. The night before his heart attack, he had scheduled a meeting with a lawyer. The meeting never happened. By afternoon, I was sitting across from an investigator. By evening, there were more. Financial crimes, medical interference, abuse of power of attorney. Robert's name stopped sounding untouchable. It started sounding criminal. That night, the phone rang. I didn't answer. It rang again. Then a message came through. You think you won. I stared at the screen. Another message followed. She won't survive this stress. I blocked the number, because fear had stopped working on me. 2 days later, the story broke. Not with drama, with documents. Headlines didn't say, "Evil Uncle," or, "Betrayal." They said things far more dangerous to a man like Robert. Investigation. Fraud. Medical exploitation. Suspicious death reopened. The facility removed his name from all authority. Accounts were frozen. Properties seized pending review. When I returned to my mother's room, she was sitting by the window again, this time with color in her face. "They stopped the pills," she said. "How do you feel?" I asked. She smiled faintly. Clear. I sat beside her. "I'm sorry," I said. "I should have questioned everything sooner." She reached for my hand. "You did when it mattered." A nurse entered with fresh flowers. "From the staff," she said. "We're glad you stayed." After she left, my mother looked at me. "He'll fight," she said quietly. "Men like him always do." "I know," I replied. She nodded. "Then promise me something. Anything. When this ends, don't let it define you." I looked at her, at the woman who had been silenced, underestimated, nearly erased. "It already does," I said. "Just not the way he planned." Outside, cameras waited, lawyers prepared. Systems that once ignored us were suddenly listening very carefully. And for the first time since my mother forgot my name, I knew exactly who I was. The trial didn't start with shouting. It started with silence. The kind of silence that fills a courtroom when everyone knows they're about to hear something that can't be unheard. My mother sat beside me, steady, composed, unmistakably present. Not the woman they had labeled lost, but the woman who had been waiting. Robert sat across the room. No charm, no smile, just a man shrinking under the weight of his own records. The prosecution laid out the evidence slowly. Financial manipulation, medical interference, abuse of authority. The reopening of my father's death wasn't sensationalized, it was treated with care, with facts. And then they called my mother. People leaned forward. The defense had built its case around one idea: that she was unreliable, that her mind could not be trusted. She took the stand without notes. "Mrs. Eleanor," the lawyer began gently, "do you understand where you are?" "Yes," she said. "And I understand why I was brought here." They asked her dates, names, details. She answered all of them. Then came the question Robert had been waiting for. "Can you explain why, for months, you failed to recognize your own son?" The room held its breath. My mother turned and looked directly at Robert. "Because I needed him to think I was powerless," she said. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. She continued, calm and precise. "When people believe you don't understand, they reveal everything. They speak freely. They stop hiding." The defense tried to interrupt. The judge raised a hand. My mother went on. "I forgot names sometimes. That was real. But I never forgot intent. And I never forgot my son." She turned to me. "Daniel," she said clearly, "stand up." I did. She faced the court again. "This is the sentence that saved me," she said. She remembers. Gasps. She explained how that moment, when Robert assumed she was gone, proved she wasn't. How the medication fog lifted when reduced. How pretending bought her time. How love gave her strength. "And my brother," she said, looking at Robert one last time, "forgot something far more important than names." "What's that?" the prosecutor asked. "That witnesses remember," she replied. The verdict didn't take long. Guilty. On all counts. Robert didn't look at us as they led him away. I didn't need him to. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. I ignored them. My mother squeezed my hand. "Ready to go home?" she asked. Home. That word meant something again. Weeks later, we sat on a quiet porch. The house, her house, had been returned. Sunlight filtered through the trees the way it used to when I was a child. My mother sipped tea and smiled. "You know," she said, "people still ask me if I remember you." "And?" I asked. She laughed. "I tell them I never forgot," she said. "I was just waiting for the right moment to be heard." I looked at her, the woman who had been dismissed, diminished, nearly erased. And I understood the truth. Dementia didn't turn me into a grieving child. The lie did. The truth turned me into a fighter. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing a forgotten voice can do is remember.